CURES is sponsored by Wheeler Health's Better Choice program. More at wheelerhealth.org.
Helping you lead a healthier life. This is Kara's Cures.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kara Sundlin, and we're here for the Kara's Cures show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness from credible sources. So thanks for being with us. It is the day after Election Day, so I thought it seemed like a good idea to have a conversation about the psychology of conflict and how we can evolve past fight or flight to enact real change. It's actually the title of a book, and I'm very happy to welcome Cynthia Rivard, who is a leadership and intuition expert, an author, and an advocate for the environment. She often supports businesses and people into creating maybe a kinder world where we can all get along better. So there is a science to this. So thank you for being with us, Cynthia.
Oh, I'm delighted to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
So I know you have a long career in executive leadership, and we all can have egos, and we think we're right, and we want to get something done. And the day after Election Day, there's a lot of opinions on what people should be doing and how we should do it. And is it the end of the world in New York City, or is it the beginning of a new era? All of that. But how do we handle conflict from a psychological basis? What would you advise people right now who have some big feelings?
Well, so I guess the first thing is the peace that we want to see in our communities, the getting along we want to see in our communities starts with each one of us. I often talk about, your inner state reflects outward and really influences the environment around you. Even if there's a lot of conflict going on around you, if you stay calm and diplomatic and really allow people to express themselves as you listen to try and understand them, they will calm down eventually and come around to being open maybe to what you have to say. A lot of what's going on now is instinctual reactions to all of the change or the potential threats we feel in our world, in our communities, in the US and around the world. You mentioned the environment and climate change. There's a lot of chaos, and we have this instinctual response to, people call it the fear, fight, or flight, the fear response. But what you see a lot of is either the freeze response, which is denialism.
Okay.
Or if you look at your social media feed, you probably see a lot of the fight response, which is people just lashing out because they want to fight for their beliefs. They feel like their beliefs are threatened. And it really, really helps, first of all, to reflect inward on where this is showing up for you. Are you reacting and fighting rather than trying to listen and understand those other viewpoints? You don't have to agree with them. That's a really key point there.
We can get along without agreeing.
Exactly. But the only way forward is to listen and have conversations, adult conversations, without throwing each other under the bus.
So let's just talk about the wiring in our brain. You say, really, we need to understand that this is the way that we I think it's sometimes unconscious. We've all been triggered, and you'd all of a sudden find yourself arguing. It could be with a family member or something is really upsetting to you. But we all are wired with a survival instinct. And so that is something that you say, when we understand that and why we might come off so strong, or we might be fighting, how does that help us maybe take the next step of toning it down?
Well, so I talk a lot about emotional intelligence, which is just trying to recognize your emotions and regulate them. If you are trying to be more aware of your own reactions, you won't be as reactive. just because you're becoming more aware of them. So it helps you to be a little calmer and bring the whole situation down and diffuse it. But it also helps a lot when you recognize it in others. Beyond Election Day just happening, we all have in the United States Thanksgiving coming up with
Yes.
family members that we may not see often and may not always agree with. But if you understand where that fight instinct is coming from, one of the areas that we fight this most strongly about are our beliefs. And if they feel threatened and they don't agree with me, they're trying to convince me otherwise, we lash out and we fight. So if you recognize that in others, you can stay calm and have compassion for where they're coming from.
Okay.
And
So
when people
let's help.
I'm sorry, when people feel heard, they tend to calm down eventually.
Okay. Yeah. So that's an important point. So let's just say we're sitting around the table, and whether it be Thanksgiving or with friends, and maybe the political beliefs are really dividing you, and you're feeling yourself going, how could this person that I love or know think that? There's just no way, and you want to get into it. Walk us through what would be a better way to evolve past the psychology of conflict.
Well, the first thing is to be curious and ask questions and make it clear that you want to try and understand them. That's an interesting viewpoint. Can you share more about how you came to that conclusion? Not in a not in a way that they feel threatened or like you're speaking down to them, but really curious and engaged. Because when people feel heard, they let their defenses down, and you can actually have a conversation. And hopefully, if it's someone you already have rapport with, like a loved one at Thanksgiving, hopefully they'll calm down and start asking you questions, and you can have an adult conversation. And that doesn't mean that either one of you are going to change your viewpoints, but it could open a door. Sometimes when you hold a viewpoint really strongly, it takes a lot of things chipping away at it before people are willing to look at that completely opposing view. It doesn't happen overnight.
And you say, we all, I think we can all agree, I hope, that we would love a world where there's more compassion and more kindness, and people feel happier. And compassion, you say, is nurtured when we remember to stay open and curious, and we just seek to understand, not necessarily agree.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I think something else that helps is if we just shift the paradigm a little bit and recognize that diversity of thought and perspectives is how we will always create progress. If we don't have any different thinking, nothing will ever change. And I think I speak for all of us when I say that, there are some circumstances where change would be good. Nobody wants to stay in sameness all the time, but if we all thought alike, nothing would ever change.
Yeah, so you have a book, Hope for a New Era and a New Breed of Leader. As you study leadership and building these skills, I think so many people are afraid to lead with their hearts, that somehow that's weaker. That's not true, is it?
No, not at all. I think it's important to recognize that leadership, first of all, doesn't require a title. We all have influence in our lives, and you probably already lead in certain aspects at certain times with your friend group or in your family. We all have influence. And it's important to just show up intentionally in the way that we influence our friends, our family, our work groups, and try to make a positive influence.
Like let's go back to, let's say we believe that and we want that. They're like, I really like what Cynthia is saying. I want to be more compassionate. I want to be less triggered. I want to seek to understand. But yet you're in a situation, we all have patterns, I guess, and you feel yourself getting very activated by something that someone is saying or doing. What do we do?
So first of all, recognize that it's a skill that we are always working on because, being human, we're emotional creatures. So recognize that your thoughts create your emotions. And if you build that awareness and you're looking for it, when you first start feeling that little bit of an unpleasant emotion, you can recognize that and think, okay, what am I thinking? Am I making this about me? Because what they're doing and saying really isn't about me, it's about them. Quite often when we get triggered, it's because we're attached to something we can't control, like their thoughts, their words, their actions. We can't really control that. So if you can shift your perspective just a little bit to something a little more neutral, or, something more about them, having compassion for what may have brought them to this place to be so ornery on that topic.
That's a word my mother used to use. I love it. Ornery, yes. You're feeling ornery. We all know what that means, okay? Yes.
It helps us get to more of a place of peace and calm, which will diffuse the situation.
Yeah, I mean, we are living in turbulent times, and I know you write about creating something that some might think is just utopia of peace and community, and yet we all seem so divided right now. How do we bridge that? And do you see from your work that we actually are moving more toward togetherness and understanding? Because it certainly doesn't sometimes feel that way.
I think the circumstances we're in right now is serving to wake people up a little more to their environment and their communities. And it is through just recognizing your individual influence that we can move the needle to a better world, because you may not feel like you can change the nation or the world, but you can make a difference in your community. You can reach out and go check on a neighbor, that kind of thing. And when we do that, we don't stop and ask them what their political beliefs are or their religious beliefs. We just see our neighbors as fellow humans and community members that may need our help.
Yeah, I mean, you actually, in your book, Hope for a New Era, you're writing about what it really takes to manifest what has been a theoretical concept throughout history, throughout religious texts, that there is actually a new era where it could be ruled by people who are really leading from the heart. And do you see that coming? And for those who are interested in creating that, what's your advice?
Be open. I talk a lot about intuition, and a lot of people think, oh, who me? I can't make a difference in the world. And yet we're all here and able to, and here for a purpose. And you need to just trust that gut instinct or that knowing you have, and just take one small step and help a friend or a neighbor or reach out to someone in your community. We can all do that. And if we all do that, imagine how much better the world would be.
And
it's the ripple effect. It will happen. It feels like it won't happen soon enough, but it will happen.
We certainly have a cultural shift toward individualism that you talk about, and away from community. I mean, we are on social media all the time, but we're less connected. So you say that's part of it. We're kind of living in this loneliness that increases your psychological suffering and maybe your us versus them modality.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think because in our society, we move around more than people did 40 years ago, you have to really be intentional. It's it's not as easy to go find someone to talk to in real life. You have to be intentional and find that community where you're living and go make a difference by checking on your neighbor. Do you even know who they are? Their names. And if someone in your community needs some extra groceries and you're going that way and you can help them out, we have to know first where we can make a difference. And now social media or the online space can be really helpful as well, because there are online communities that are local that could hook you up, but you really get that connection when you're in person with people. So I encourage everyone to be intentional about finding that and getting out of the comfort zone of staying home and just being online, watching TV or gaming.
So, for those of us who quote unquote live in the real world, you're working in corporate America, you're a news anchor on a television station, whatever that is, our mindset has been that a leader has to be tough, or a leader who's a boss who has to worry about the bottom line. And you're envisioning a new kind of leader. What do you see? Because obviously it seems like those things still really matter.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, to recognize the leadership or the influence in each person. You don't need a title. I'm not talking about the CEOs of big companies, although they can do this too. It will be a much better world when people, the big corporations that have to produce profit to exist, also look at the morale of their staff and the affordable wages that they're paying and the impact that their business is making on the environment. We need to have a heart and look at all of that. And not only can you still make profits that way if you approach it a little differently, but you might get a more loyal following and make more profits. Just imagine that. But the two are not exclusive. It's just the way the world has gravitated lately, very much focused on greed and profits rather than our humanity. And they're not exclusive.
Right.
We can have both.
Absolutely. It's interesting. There's a book I always tell people to read it, and I'm sure you know it, but Thrive by Arianna Huffington, where she went in and she looked at, they looked at the bottom lines. In fact, one of the big corporations here in Connecticut, Aetna, when they started adding more yoga, when they started adding more care for their employees and groups that help them and more flexibility at work, all those things that sound like they're just really nice, improved the bottom line. And that she, as a businesswoman, started finding that there was something to be said, this idea that you had to make just profits and work hard and at the expense of anything was actually, that was the reverse, that people worked together and created more when they felt more involved or cared for.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do we make that
not
change
exclusive.
if you're a manager or a leader? What do you say when you're in that room with them teaching bosses as a strategist?
What do I say about care for your people? And it's every business is different. And they may already be doing a lot of things right. It's not just about the business leaders, it's about the individuals recognizing that they have influence in their co-working groups, in that business. They contribute to the work environment, each individual does, and they have a voice. They could speak up and be a leader in their working groups. It's not just the people with titles, and that's a big part of what I try and drive home. You don't need a title to make a difference in your communities or your workspace.
Yeah. We're going to take a moment and hear from one of our sponsors, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about shifting the paradigm about how we can learn to embrace instead of vilify our differences. Let's listen to one of our sponsors.
Struggling with gambling? Wheeler Health's Better Choice program offers personalized support and treatment to help you regain control. Visit wheelerhealth.org to learn more and take the first step towards recovery today.
All right, welcome back. We're talking about the psychology of conflict here in CARES Cures today, if you're just joining us. We have certainly a lot of different ideas. We've just had an election day. You've got both parties fighting about what it means and all this. But really, from your perspective, Cynthia, as you've written books on this and helped people lead to create this new era, what does it take to start embracing the idea that our differences are helpful rather than vilify them?
You know, I always say when you're trying to learn, grow, or develop a new skill, awareness is 90% of the battle. If you just look around and become aware of the idea, if you think about in a corporate environment, if you need to solve a problem, one of the first things people do is brainstorming. That means throwing up all the crazy ideas you can come up with. Not that you'll use all of them, or perhaps not any of them, but people feed off each other and you come up with combined ideas, frequently the power of the mastermind, that nobody before had thought of individually. And it's that group energy and that creative outside of the box thinking that really can help us create progress. But it's also the coming together and working together. You know, if we look at politics, certainly in our country, people aren't doing as much coming together and discussing and maybe, you know, building consensus and compromise here and there. The more time you spend arguing, the less you get done.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring it back to the kitchen table, because all politics are kitchen table, right? And we're going to be at the kitchen or the dining room table really soon for Thanksgiving. And often this is a thing that people worry about, where communication breaks down, emotions go everywhere. And this is where you really want to stress that we have the ability within ourselves to kind of regulate. So give us some skills that we can prepare, knowing that we might be coming up against folks who have, who might want to needle us or have some difficult opinions or beliefs that we don't agree with.
Absolutely. Well, emotional regulation, as I mentioned earlier, is an ongoing skill. And the more you practice it, because surely, you know, there's probably other places in your life that things come up, whether it's in traffic or, you know, a passing conversation with your partner. There are things that may trigger us elsewhere in life. First, you want to build your awareness. And if there are recurring, or if you're thinking about Thanksgiving and you can think of what might come up, there's one particular relative you have in mind and you just know they're going to bring up that topic, well, then you can think about what it is that will trigger you. What's your thought about it? Because it's your thought that creates the reaction and the emotion. And then brainstorm. What's a different perspective I can take? Just be curious about it rather than, again, making it personal. You know, if you know they're going to say that thing, how can you just be curious and change your thinking about what they said so you remain calm and you can listen to give them a little space, and then perhaps be comfortable coming back with, you know, expanding the conversation with your point of view if they seem open to it. A lot of people choose just not to engage at all because, you know, they're not going to be open to it. And that's a good strategy too.
Okay.
You know,
so
if you see them once a year, you know.
Okay. So sometimes the idea is if you go into it ahead of time saying, I'm going to keep the peace, that could be the strategy versus thinking that you're out to educate someone or change them. If you take a moment and think, it would be better then just to change the topic to the weather or maybe take a break rather than get into an argument.
Right. Well, you know, with family, you know them well, and you know if eventually you can share an opinion and nip away at their ideas a little bit, chances are good you're not going to be able to. So it would be good to just maybe change the topic or let them vent a little and not engage.
Yeah. You really teach about the power of compassionate communication and egoless leadership. Is there such a thing as an egoless leader, especially when we're talking about, we're talking about politics right now, and all you hear about are big egos clashing?
Yes, yes. Well, I define ego in leadership as being self-serving. If you have, someone who's a public servant and they're making decisions for the greater good, then that's egoless leadership. You still may not like their opinions and what they're doing, but are they doing it for themselves in a,
Okay.
self-serving, or are they truly, making ethical decisions and doing what they think is best?
Yeah. I mean, I love that, we're talking about something called conscious capitalism more and more in the world. If it's a new term to people, it's the idea that, you used to think business and pleasure, they're totally separate, like church and state. I mean, you have to only worry about the money. You have to be tough. You have to be this. What you're saying is you believe we're moving into a new time, or hopefully moving into a new time, where we have to not just be in our heads, but be in our hearts when we lead.
Yes, yes, because, well, if you think about it, what really, I said you don't need a title, what compels people to follow someone? Ultimately, it's more compelling if they can read your energy and you're coming from a place of positive intent, egoless, conscious leadership. And that is what we really need to bring our world into where we want to live in the future,
Yeah.
where our environment is clean and we can live in harmony and balance. We need more people deciding things based on what's good for everyone versus self-serving ego.
Cynthia, thank you for raising these important ideas. A shout out where people can follow you or get in touch with you if they want to check out the new book.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, if you remember my name, CynthiaRivard.com. I have all the links there. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Cynthia, and that's Cynthia Rivard, Rivard. So if you want to learn a little bit more about the psychology of conflict and becoming a more compassionate leader, we appreciate your time today on CURES Cures.
It's fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. And for everyone listening at home, thanks for being here and have a great day and be well.